Welcome to another episode of the Creative Power Hour. I'm your host, Marcus Whitney, and today's guest is Dr. Turner Nashe. What's good, my man?
How you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here.
I think this is an important format.
Dude, you're important, man. Everyone's about to learn how important you are in a second here. So let's jump in, man. Everybody who does this show starts with an origin story, and I'll let them kick it off from wherever they want to start.
Origin story. Good Lord. Tell me what you mean by origin story.
Yeah. So typically people will either talk about like, here's where I was born, raised. This is what it was like growing up in my house. You know, for you, I know you have an inflection point in your story. So, but I do think the background is always sort of helpful, like because you know, knowing how people were raised.
Yeah. Okay.
You get it. So,
right. So born and raised Cleveland, Ohio. Middle kid. You know, middle kids get a lot of time on their hands, right? Because the older kids cause trouble and the babies get babied, and we just kind of surf the city, right? So back when I was growing up, I sound like an old man now. You know, we didn't have a lot of controls, right? So you can get on your bike and you can pretty much go anywhere in the city. So I had friends all over the city from school that I would, you know, just roll up on. And, you know, man, I remember playing football in the streets and baseball in the streets. There were no organized sports because nobody had any money.
Yeah.
And it was just a more social time. So ended up going to a school called John Carroll University, which was in Cleveland. It's a small Jesuit school. From there, really became interested in entrepreneurship because I started seeing how upper middle class people lived going to a private school. So I originally was from public school.
Yep.
And I was like, damn, you could have
By the way,
credit
them
card.
taps might get on the mic.
Okay. So I can't be emphatic.
Yeah, because
Okay.
yeah.
Like,
Yo, exactly. Because I can tell where this is getting ready to go.
Yeah. So I could just see that there were just differences in culture. There were differences in experience.
How old are you at this point?
Man, probably like 17, 18. 17, 18.
Wow, that's a hell of a time to get that lesson.
You know what, though? When you're poor growing up and everybody's poor, you don't really know that you're poor.
Right.
You don't really know that. I won't even say poor because it never felt like it.
Right.
You know? But if I look at socioeconomic status and I look at the fact that, you know, part of that I was living in the projects, part of that I was in public schools on free and reduced lunch and all of those things. I mean, yeah, the definition is that I grew up in a poor neighborhood amongst other poor people. But, man, we were extremely rich as it relates to trying to figure out life and learning how to depend on one another and learning how to depend on yourself, more importantly.
Yeah.
So, again, like I said, ended up going to college and saw that other people had these legacy resources, you know, that maybe their dad or their grandfather or their grandmother, their auntie gave them some money to go to school. And I was like, I don't have that, right? So, you know, truth be told, man, my dad wouldn't even sign my student loan paperwork, man. So I had to, you know, I think I passed the statute. I had to sign his name for him, right? Because I had to go to school.
Wow.
And, you know, that was never lost. I mean, I did feel a sense of responsibility to pay that money back, and I did. But just going to a school where the kids had credit cards, man, I never knew a lot of adults that had credit cards, right? So how to manage your money and you know, just being exposed to those things and, you know, actually going to college and learning how to think critically. And, you know, I'm like, man, if they can do this, I can do this, because I started to see that I was just a little bit smarter than some of them, right? Mm-hmm. So opportunity is one thing, but having to earn it, you know, and keep a 3.0 or 4.0 to make sure that you can get your scholarships paid, you know, that was a lot of work. And then I actually screwed up one semester and actually it was 2 semesters, right? So then I got put out. And, man, I never forget, I ended up going to a community college, and I just knew when I started seeing, you know, young ladies bringing their children to class and teachers who were drinking during class, and it was just a different environment than the private school, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, man, I've gotten out of my orbit. I need to get back to that because I know that my trajectory will be greater from that organization, right? So took 1 semester off, going to community college, went right back, and man, unfortunately, you know, I tell the story to my kids because it's just what it is, man. You know, when you grow up in certain environments, there are only certain things that you can do that are readily available, And sometimes against your morality or against your common sense, you're forced into situations where you have to make the best out of what you have. So I'm not proud of some of the things I did, but I will tell you that, when I did go back to that school, I didn't have any scholarships, and I'd made a deal with the business office. Lady's name was Diane Ward. I'd never forget, man. She was like the gooch walking around campus. If you owed her money, you just tried to stay out of her way. And she was like, look, you got to pay us $600 every 2 weeks. And I'm like 18, 19. I'm like, shit, where are you going to get that? So some things happened, and then other things didn't happen. And I ended up, ultimately, man, so I'm a religious guy. I look back, and now I see that the Lord was always really working in my life, even when I didn't understand who or what he was. So I got a job at the post office, and literally, man, like I would work 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week, and I was taking 16 to 18 credit hours every semester trying to get out because I was so far back. And, man, that's where I really just learned how to grind for 2-3 days at a time, right? Like, it's just a process. It wasn't difficult. Classes were never difficult. It was just not having that training and not having those mentors to show you how to get through a process and manage a process.
Yeah.
So having come out of college, a buddy of mine and I had hooked up. Man, I'll never forget. This is crazy. I was a financial planner at the time for AXA and DLJ Equitable, and I hated it, man, because, I was young, and people would be like, man, you're too young to know how to work money. You know what I mean? But I had my certifications and my licenses, and, I was studying for the Series 7, and I was like, shit, I don't really think that's what I want to do with my life. It's a lot of responsibility to hold the money for somebody's grandbaby for 20 years, right? And I was like, it's just difficult. And in the community where I had probably the most number of connections, the highest number of connections, we didn't have any money, right? So then, I was like, this is probably not going to lead anywhere. So I'd gone to a conference. This is going to be my last trade show that I worked. And I bumped into a guy that was like, look, I got this motorcycle business. I don't really know where to take it. And I was like, well, if you give me half, I'll figure out where to take it. And he was like, half? That's a big number. And I was like, you never met me, but I can do some amazing things. And I know that from my youth, not really having been formally trained in business. It's kind of like going from street ball to formalized ball, right? Like I know how to run between the cars, and I know how to avoid the dogs.
Yeah, but can you call a play?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And can you be structured
read a
enough?
play? Yeah.
Can you run a route?
Can you run a route?
Can you hold your time?
That's right. That's right.
So, and I'll get back to that a little bit later. But I knew that I had what it took, and eventually, man, just kind of being an entrepreneur. I ended up getting half of that company, and I was like, man, what am I going to do now? So we sold motorcycle apparel. It's called the Shoe Band for all of those folks who ever have been to a Myrtle Beach bike show. Like, we were, man, this was 20 years ago. Oh, my God.
It goes fast.
Oh, my gosh.
It
was
goes
20
fast.
years ago. So we would go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, every Memorial Day for Bike Weekend, and we threw a concert the 2 years we did it. So I think the first year we had, like, Petey Pablo and 3-6 Mafia. The second year we had Rough Riders.
They were big.
I mean, back then.
Rough Riders at the bike show.
Man.
What?
But that's another story, right? So just knowing yourself.
Yeah.
We could ramble on, and you might have to edit a lot of this, but,
we ended
up getting half of that company. My homie and I, he was like, Rough Rider. I didn't have a motorcycle. I'm like, well, let's find out who they are. Man, we drove to New York, got an appointment in the Rough Rider office. They were 2 hours late coming. My man, Joaquin Dean, rolls up in the longest, blackest Suburban I've ever seen with the best sound system I've ever heard. And he just walks in like, yo, what's up? What y'all want to do? And we're sitting there like, damn, this is Rough Rider. Like, this is the CEO.
Yeah.
And we're like, we want to go to Myrtle. We want the bikes. We want the whole thing. He set it up, and we went. We told him we were throwing a concert. We were selling apparel. I mean, this is the first lesson in business that I missed. I hit it a little bit with a little bit of money, but I missed the scale that I was supposed to hit. I still kick myself in the ass to this day.
But you were how old?
Shit, man, 24,
Come
25.
on, man. Okay.
Right, so we ended up getting Rough Rider in a deal.
Yeah.
At the same time, I ended up signing a deal. Preston and I signed a deal with Walmart to distribute our apparel.
Wow.
In like 3,000 stores. So I told this story in the Business Journal, man. Like, we're out here hustling, man. It's hot. We're in a car, no air conditioning. I remember driving down the street. We get a call from Walmart.
Just real quick, the Business Journal doesn't even know who Rough Riders is, though. Can we just keep it real?
Probably,
Probably
not.
I mean, no disrespect.
Yeah.
I've been in there plenty of times.
So there's a lot of detail to this where I probably could write a chapter in a book where, there was a store in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, where they had strip searched African Americans because there was some money that came up missing. Yeah. And the community was up in arms, like, what the fuck, man? Like, you can't do that. And they were like, well, to make good, we'll do business with somebody in the community. And I was like, well, shit, I'm in the community. And then one night I'm at home, there's a commercial on TV, and Walmart's like, we buy from Americans. I was like, well, shit, I'm an American, right? And I'm in the community. So, called them, went in. They tried to give us the runaround. One day a guy calls on the phone. I think his name was like Rick Mangrum. I remember these weird names. But anyway, he's like, I'll buy 6 units. And I'm like, shit, 6 units? Man, we can sell that on the way home, and we're not that thirsty. And I hang up the phone on him. And he calls back like, are you serious? This is Walmart. And I was like, man, it's too hot to be messing around with you. What do you want to do? He goes, all right, I'll buy 30,000 units. And I was like, now we're talking, right? Now we're talking. He's like, this is before the days of email and texting. He goes, look for a communication from us. I think he mailed it, man. It was like an acceptance letter. Yeah. You get your Walmart number, dude, you can start doing some amazing deals. So the thing that I missed out on was I should have done a licensing deal with Rough Riders in order to sell more merch at Walmart. Yeah. But I didn't have a mentor to tell me that. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So
I mean, who even knew what a licensing deal was?
This was before Sean John. This was before Rockaware. This is before all of that. Right. But man,
you were right at the intersection.
Right there.
That's crazy.
So missed it.
But
crazy. Learned a lot, right? So we end up coming out of that. I'll never forget, man. I was like, we got a check. Our first check was like $75,000. And I couldn't believe it because it was the biggest check that I had ever seen. And then the next check came was like $350. And I was like, man, we're rich. We're rich. And Preston and I, we put it in the bank. And that's the first time somebody called me Mr. Nash at a bank. I was like, you just dogging me out when my stuff was overdraft like a week ago. But then I started to understand the value of a banking relationship. Long story short, man, Preston, love him to death, but he's one of those guys that lives life every day. And I'll never forget, man, like he's like, I'm taking my family to Disneyland. I was like, all right, cool. He goes, I need $10,000. And I was like, man, I really want to keep this money so we can grow the business. He's like, man, I got to go to Disney. And I was like, okay. I said, well, whatever you take, I got to take it too, because you're not going to burn up all the cash, right? So, dude, I'll never forget. This was like a Sunday. He takes $10,000. I take 10. He calls me Wednesday. He's like, yo, T, I need another 10. And I was like, what did you do with $10,000 in 3 days? And he's like, man, we took helicopter rides. We did blah, blah, blah. So now I'm up to 20 sitting in this account. And I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Right. And then I was like, well, if things continue to go this way, you need to start looking for your exit. Didn't know it was called an exit at the time. You need to be looking for what's next. Yeah. Right? Because this is, at this pace, you're going to burn out in 3 to 4 months. Right. And I started looking at real estate. It's funny how the Lord works in your life, man. Whenever you're ending a chapter, another one appears to open, but it's never like you thought it would be. It's a new person in your life that might have a new set of opportunities. Yeah. And it's really up to you to grow the seed of that relationship to see how it can work out. Yeah. So I never rush that, right? So, man, I'm at the bank. I got this $20,000. This OG walks up to me. He's like, what are you going to do with that money? And I was like, man, I don't know. He's like, well, come back in my office and talk to me. And I was like, all right, cool. He says, man, look, I got this long list of all these houses that the bank owns. They're called REOs. Mm-hmm. If you agree to buy a block of them, I'll give them to you with no money down, and then you just use that money to go fix them up. And I was like, you gonna give it to me? Wow. Right? Like, he goes, well, I mean, you'll have loans on them, but, that's the premise. I was like, man, I could do that. And I'm like, well, what are they worth now? What are they worth when you finish? And I'm like, shit, man, that's like $25,000 a house, right? Okay, let's run it, right? Yeah. So I'm all in. I push that 20 in and open up another account, and we start doing paperwork. And this is crazy, man, because right now I'm like 26, 27, and just what I thought would happen happened. Burned through the money, never made the investments in the product on the motorcycle end. Yeah. But by the time that was over, I had houses that were, I was rehabbing them and creating revenue and income. And
what year is this?
Man, it's got to be like 02, 03.
Okay.
02,
All right.
03.
All right. Market's hot, man.
Yeah.
Market's hot.
So then I start, having different brokers at different brokerage shops doing loans for me. And I would understand, like, every time it was time to close, they would go up on their fees. And, I'd never forget, like, this is the entrepreneur kicking in again. You don't know what to call it yet.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting downtown, and I just bought this Range Rover as part of my previous money, right?
Sure, yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm yelling and screaming, and this cop is knocking on the window. He's like, "Are you all right?" I'm like, "Man, this broker just went up on his fees," and he just started laughing. He's like, "I know how that is, right?" So I was like, "I gotta start my own mortgage company," and I did. So I opened that up and hired one of my brokers as the operations manager. Man, we grew that office, that business, into like 7 states, and we were doing amazing numbers. And I never forget, I was like, this is too easy. I don't have any training at this. I shouldn't be making this much money at the age I'm at. There's some governor that's come off the game, right? Like, this can't last forever.
Right.
And I took a cruise with my wife. We'd gone down to Miami. And I'll never forget, man, I'm standing on top of the ship looking over, like, a government cut. You can see, like, Palm Island and Star Island.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at these yachts, and I'm like, what the hell are these people doing to get these? Because I know they're expensive. I don't really know how much they cost.
Yeah. You don't know
Right.
exactly how expensive.
And remember, I'm like, shit, there's really no internet. You're on a ship or whatever. But, we get back a couple days later. I'm in the airport at Miami, and I'm buying up every magazine I can.
Yeah.
Because I'm used to $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 homes.
Yeah, right.
Every house in this magazine was $3, $4, $5 million. But these folks are young like me. So I'm like, well, maybe I'm just in the wrong environment. And I'm like, babe, we got to move to Miami. She's like, what? I said, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, we're doing well enough in Ohio that we can move to Miami. So went down there and got a condo, man, 1155 Brickell Bay Drive. It was nice. And, lived down there, raising 2 kids because we figured we would work back and forth. So this is like 05, 06 during heavy hurricane season.
Yeah, okay.
And I never forget, man, I'm driving one day to take her to get her hair done.
Did Andrew happen then?
It was like Wilma, Katrina, like that whole year.
Yeah.
So we actually bought it and spent more time in Ohio because, like, every month there was another hurricane.
Yeah.
So I'm taking her to get her hair done one day, and I'd never forget this, man. I'm driving. I got a bus of U because it's a weird street, and I see this guy in a plastic resin chair, smoking a cigarette, no shirt on, and right behind him on the wall it reads, "Mortgages." And I was like, "Oh, damn. This shit's about to wrap." Like, if that guy is doing mortgages, it's about to wrap.
Yeah.
And, and now everybody knows the story of 06, 07, 08, and whatever.
Of course, yeah.
So, man, this goes the next chapter into resilience. From that moment through what later became the financial crisis, which bankrupted me, right? And then on top of that, somebody's got to bleed for it.
Did it bankrupt you because you were so leveraged on the property side? Like, was that what it was? You were very leveraged on the property side.
Absolutely.
The values dropped,
absolutely,
and everything
you
turned
can't
upside
recover.
down.
Well, in the credit markets,
exactly.
So you can't even do loans for other people.
Yeah.
So
so now your revenue that you were depending on is gone, and you're upside down. You got these payments that are all due on these properties that you're the got it.
And a lot of properties, because of the way that these licenses are set up, when you're a broker or a lender, you have to basically personally guarantee these lines.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just the houses. It wasn't just my homes. It was the homes that were in my, that were underwritten by my shop.
Yep.
And man, it was, man, that was a rough period because I don't like losing. Right.
That's a lot.
But you can't control that. I had to go to therapy for that one, man. And he was like, "Dude, it's the market. Like, what are you gonna do?" And I was like, "Well, I should have seen it coming." He's like, "You and like 20 million other people, right?"
I was about to say,
it's not on your back. So, man,
But what an incredible lesson, right? Because for so many entrepreneurs who have come up in the last 5-6 years and have never even seen a market crash, much less been impacted by it like you have, they don't even know what. They don't even know what that looks like.
Yeah, I wish I didn't know what it looked like. But they say once in a lifetime, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, we really took a hit for that, and man, I had to give it up, bro. Like, I had to give up my house, my cars, my apartment buildings, my rentals. I mean, everything, And then I got back. Here's another thing. Like, I knew when I was going through the climb to that.
Yeah.
That I was like, this can't last forever.
Yeah.
I didn't bleed
moving
enough
so
for
fast.
this. I didn't bleed enough for it.
Yeah.
And I bumped into a buddy of mine, Charles Bone, man, one day.
You're saying a lot there.
He's like, do you go to church? And I was like, nah, man, church. He's like, you got to go, man. I think it would be a great place for you to learn some new things. And he goes, but I'm going to tell you, when you start going, the devil's going to start getting at you. And I was like, it's an old dude. I was like, all right, Charles, we're going to have lunch next week and we'll talk about it. So anyway, I started going to church like that January of, I want to say it was 2008, 2009. There's a lot of things that lay over other things in my life because I follow one of Einstein's quotes that says, everything comes to he who hustles while he waits. Mm-hmm. So I'm never just doing one thing.
Yep.
So in trying to wade my way through the financial crisis, I've also enrolled in my master's program at TSU. Mm-hmm. I'm also fighting a bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. And then they hit me with a case. And when I say a case, I mean a criminal case in May.
Now, who's they?
They would be the state of Ohio versus Turner Nash.
Okay.
Which is really crazy when you see it on paper.
Yeah.
You're like, the whole state is against me?
Yeah.
And, long story short, man, that case went on for 18 months.
And was it related to your business?
To my ownership in the mortgage business. When they're like, there was fraud, there was this, there was that. I think throughout the entire industry, lenders included, they just got loose. But unfortunately, what I saw was a lot of black and brown people go to jail.
Of course.
And nobody from Wall Street go to jail.
Right.
And they had their hands on the money, right? So not really a blame game. I've actually never had this conversation with anybody since about what I felt happened. I felt that I was a successful black man and I could be an easy target to show that I could have only been successful doing dirt.
Yeah.
And I flipped both of my middle fingers to this day.
Yeah.
Like I was successful before that.
Right.
And I was successful after that.
Right.
I really feel like as an entrepreneur, the real key, Marcus, I'm sure as you know, is learning how to run a business.
Yep.
If this is the only widget I got today, somebody's going to buy this shit in bulk.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And when you can learn how to run a business, it just really opens up the world for you. Mm-hmm. But then there are levels of business, right? Mm-hmm. So another thing that I do is I try to have mentors. I'll find somebody that's in an area that I want to be in, and I'll meet with them and have lunch. And truth be told, for anybody that's young, that's thinking about this, or old, it doesn't matter. When you call somebody and you ask them for help, man, I've never gotten turned down. Like I'll read about somebody in the paper and be like, I need to meet them, and and I'll meet them, or you bump into them somewhere, and you're like, man, I tried to call you, you didn't call me back.
Yeah.
And they'll be.
But let me ask you a question on that. As you've been sharing this story, first of all, there was something that I felt like was missing early on because the things you were saying had too much wisdom in them for there to not be some mentorship or for you to just be an old soul. I don't want to claim and say what it is, but the overall look, you're growing up in Cleveland, Ohio. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, so I know enough to know like what that environmental influence looks like. And even as you're going through things, the way that you're looking at things and the assessments that you're making and the decisions you're making to be a business person, right? I mean, even that, right? Something feels like it's there. Anyway, I wanted to pay you a compliment to say, yes, when you've reached out to people for mentorship, no one's ever turned you down. But I think that was because they assessed your merit and your intentions in reaching out to them and decided this is somebody who actually wants mentorship, not a handout or not to waste my time, or because I think I think there's a lot of that out there. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
Yeah, I do. I totally get what you're saying.
I'm not trying to not. I just want to say that that's a little bit of a caution to the advice that you're giving right now, which is to say, have your shit right before you start asking for someone's time, because someone's time is so valuable. You've already done so much by the time you start reaching out for people's time, man. It's like
I had a history.
Yeah,
I had a track record.
You did, man. You weren't coming out of nowhere and just saying, "Hey, I need you to be a mentor."
And I have a rule. I never, if you agree to be my mentor, I'll never ask you for money.
See, I mean, look,
right?
These are the kinds of things that
Okay.
Anyway,
yeah.
So keep going.
Jump in.
And by the way, man, people haven't come to me sort of totally out of pocket, but there have been cases where people have to do more work on themselves.
They're not ready yet.
They just have to do more work on themselves because you can tell in the approach. You can tell in the approach. And so
No, that's a great point, man. Whenever I call somebody, my shit's together.
Right.
Like, I know exactly what I want to do with that person. I know exactly what I need.
Yes.
And it's funny if you ask them, when I go to meet with a mentor, I have an agenda that I'll send to them before we even meet.
Yes.
Because I don't want to waste your time thinking at the table. I want you to already know what I want. Right. So that just comes with wisdom. But I agree with you on the time piece. I don't take on a lot of people because they're just not ready yet. Right. And it's a fuck off of my time trying to get you ready.
Yeah.
Especially if you're an adult. Now, I'll do it for kids because they don't know any better.
That's
right.
Different.
It's a totally different market, right?
That's different.
But for an adult, you're just not ready. So I get these mentors even still. And what I try to do is I'm in a really weird place where I've had some success, which is really even difficult for me to say. Did you hear me hesitate and stutter?
Yeah. And by the way, we haven't even tapped into your success yet. I mean, I've been happy to let you go on with the origin story because we got to the.
This is the origin.
We got to come back to the case,
okay?
Because that is an inflection point. But finish this thought.
So the case piece. Again, as I overlay school and the case and the bankruptcy and blah 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 blah, I'm making dinner for my kids because I'm not working. And I hear this thing on CNN that says 2 out of 3 black men will end up in prison in their lifetime. And I'm like, you turn around like, what did I just hear? And the lady says it again. And I was like, holy shit, like that can't be by happenstance because we're talking about statistics and things that are random in school. And I'm like, that doesn't sound random. That sounds very specific, right? So, then all of my studies, man, like, I did my master's. The market was still down. I said, well, let me get my doctorate. Because I think I can get through it. I had a buddy of mine that had his really young. He goes, man, just treat it like business. You're not doing anything all day. Go at it like you would go after a deal. And I did that. So I did my master's in a year, and I did my doctorate, including my dissertation, in 2 years. So I was done in 3.
Wow.
And it was just a blessing, right? So I started focusing on why is it that 2 out of 3 black men will go to prison, and why is it that I even got caught up in a case for some shit I didn't do and didn't even know, and I'll just tell you, man, there were like 32 witnesses that they had on this sheet for my case, like right before I was going to trial. I didn't know any of them.
Yeah.
But all the people I did know weren't on the witness list. So I was like, man, this is crazy. One of my lawyers was like, look, you might beat the case, but you'll never beat the ride. And I was like, shit. Right? I was like, shit.
Yeah.
I got to get over that. So anyway, I have a lot of thoughts about how that works.
That was deep.
Right? But that's what spurred me to get into corrections. I'd had many a friend that had gotten locked up, and I was like, man, you was too slow hitting the fence.
Right.
You should have been doing. You should have been smarter.
You were doing X, Y, Z.
And you weren't thinking about the system has intentionally placed implicit bias within the legal system, the entire commerce system, the housing system. Like, all of this shit works together against groups of people.
Yes.
It's no different. And I have really strong opinions that I'll say for a bottle of wine with anybody that wants to reach out later. But to say that I was like, man, I could change anything. The Lord has really made me to be a mountain mover. So I really look for my purpose here.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, I can make a difference here. So that's the origin story of where I got. And what I just gave you brings me up to about 2010.
Okay.
So I'm sitting in this class at TSU, and the iPad comes out. And I was like, damn, that would be fire if you could take an iPad back to your cell and do your work. So the buddy I had the motorcycle company with was just getting out for some foolishness. And he was like, T, I didn't have shit to do all day. I'm reading like old books, eating Cheetos. Like, they got these tablets, man. That would be, no, he said an MP3 player. Because remember, iPods are really, really small. And I was like, man, nobody's really trying to do that. Like, it's expensive. You look into the distribution rights and the DRM, and like, it's just crazy. And that never went anywhere. But I was focused on education. So as I finished my doctorate, the iPad comes out. I had a class called American Public School Law. And I wanted to go speak with the commissioner for Tennessee. His name was George Little. I said, man, these iPads just came out. There's no way you can't have these in your facility. Like, you got to have them. Because, you know, you're spending a ton of money on education, and you only graduated like 300 people last year. And he's like, never. I can't do it. It's a security risk. My first responsibility was to the public. And I was like, man. I said, well, do you know anybody?
And just for chronology, not a crazy response, because the iPhone just came out in 2007. So just a little bit of credit for your vision here.
I appreciate it.
Right? Like you saw something that was going to become so common. Yeah. But at that moment, it wasn't that common yet.
You know what, man? To an entrepreneur, that shit's like being on a dock, right? Like, and there's just this vast ocean. This is literally how I see it. And I can make some shit and stand on that dock,
right,
hoping that a ship will show up one day.
Right.
But an entrepreneur knows that something is coming.
Yeah.
You just don't know when, but you know that shit is coming.
Yeah.
So it really becomes a cash burn.
Yeah.
How much cash can you burn
timing.
before?
It's timing.
Right. It's timing.
Can I sustain until?
Right.
Yeah.
So I knew it was coming. I knew that people were spending money, so there was the problem. And eventually, you know, this is public record, but shit, man, I came up with that in February of 2009. That thought. Okay. Interviewed Commissioner Little. I didn't make any money until like 2014. Like the first check on that, but it was a big ass check, right? So it was worth all of the years of waiting and perfecting the craft, you know. And then there were some other really great things that happened after there. So let me stop there. Do you have any questions? Like what's on your mind?
Well, so I don't have any questions about what you've told me thus far. Mm-hmm. I have questions now about how you have shifted from one type of business to another type of business to another type of business, and with relatively short ramp-up time, gotten it. Because on one hand, I would say, 5 years in, 2009 to 14, before you get your first check, that's work put in. And at the same time, we're talking about you going from selling something in the retail market that's actually kind of a niche product, right? Yep. To selling a financial product, very different type of product, okay? Yep. To then going and selling a technology product to the state. Mm-hmm. These are three pretty different types of businesses. Now, you have the vision and you're understanding the sales part, but the ops are not the same in these three things. You got to operate these three things very, very differently. So talk to me a little bit about how have you managed to do that successfully across three different types of businesses in the way that you have?
So the first two words that came to mind was poverty and intelligence. I'm so afraid of being poor again. Right, like as I was in my youth, that I'm not afraid to take risk, because nothing, man.
People have different types of fears, man.
Nothing creates fear in me like going back to 13444 Puritas Avenue in the projects and opening up a box of cereal and seeing some roaches. People like that kind of fear scares me. Yeah. I never want to go back there. Even when I was going through my case, one day I was driving through Nashville, and I had pulled up in something that was very similar to Puritas, and I was looking around, and I was like, this shit has not changed. You know, chicken bones and dirty diapers and shit in the parking lot. And I needed that to be like, get the fuck up and get back at it. So I've run away from poverty as hard as I can. Poverty to me is like, it's like the tractor beam on the Death Star, right? Like if you get too close to that shit, it'll pull you in. So you got to turn everything
right.
Like you're gunning your shit to get away from it. And the second word, when I said intelligence, back in college days, man, I learned that there were two types of intelligence and two types of motivation, right? So, or two types of stress. So on the intelligence piece, there's crystallized and there's fluid. I would say crystallized intelligence is the epitome of the old dude at the club, right?
Yep.
Like his game is past. He's going to be the best he's ever been, but it was probably 20 years ago, right?
Yep.
So, and then there's the fluid intelligence where, I've been given a gift to be able to pick things up quickly and utilize them quickly. And when I say stress, there's eustress and distress, right? So, eustress is motivation, and I'll constantly give myself goals that I don't think I can hit, but I know I can hit them.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think I can hit them, but I know if I apply my shit just right,
Right.
that I can hit them, and I don't.
There is a voice that's saying, "Ooh, that looks really hard."
Yeah.
And then there's another voice that's like, "Yeah, but
Yeah.
you can
do
do
it.
that.
You can do it.
You can do
right?
it. Right.
So when I apply those to what I do, man, to your point, business is business, right? Like you buy low, you sell high. I go and find somebody that wants to eat fish before I go catch one, because it's a lot of work to catch fish,
Yeah.
right? And when I get back, I also realize that I'm not a chef, so my job has to end at some point.
Yeah.
My job was to catch the fish and then pass that shit off to a chef who can actually finish it for another chapter or two. And it's just when you learn that sometimes you have to get out of your own way, your limitations, both at the bottom and at the top, and you live within your skill set, but you complement yourself with other people that have both sides of you, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I can see a lot of this shit in my brain, and it's really difficult sometimes
No, you
to put
articulated
it into
well.
words.
You articulated
right?
it well. So I want to ask a follow-up question on that, because you started the first business as the number two, right? But I think you led with something that feels very authentic, and I wonder how well that's, or how consistent that has been in your follow-on business ventures, where you were more than number one. You were the idea guy, which is the 50% deal, right? So it's incentives, right? Talk to me about you're
It's
not the
so
chef.
basic, man.
Talk to me about you're not
Yeah.
the chef, right? But you need the chef.
It's so basic.
Yeah.
I don't have to be the chef, but I want to own the restaurant.
Yes.
Right. So
how do you incentivize? How do you incentivize?
let me back up a little bit
Yeah.
and say, when I was living in the projects and my parents are divorced and we would move a lot, I never liked getting the notices that you have to move out or your lights are off, and I was always like, man, when I get older, I'm gonna own my own house, and I transfer that over to business. I don't touch shit unless I'm an owner. So when you say, how do I incentivize, I don't even mind partners. I'll take on a complimentary partner in a heartbeat, because I don't want to do all the work.
Right.
And
Right.
And a good horse
This
makes
is what I'm
everybody
talking about,
money,
by the way.
Right. And what I realized a long time ago is, if I don't have money to finance your dreams.
Right.
I don't have money to finance my shit.
Right.
But if your dreams line up with my dreams,
Then we're aligned.
right, I might even let you fuck around and do some sweat equity, and I'll put up the seed capital, right?
Then we're aligned.
But we have to be in the same boat.
Yep.
Or I'm wasting time.
Yep.
And I don't have a lot of time.
Who does?
Right? Like, I'm serious,
Yeah.
man. This is a conversation I just had with my wife. I said, man, I've been working 7 days a week for 25 years.
Amen.
I'm 45. I've slept in my car. Right? Like I've rolled up to a hotel, like I had a room there, and then everybody else would go in, and I would come back out to my car and sleep in the car, because I needed that money to make a marketing document for the customer, right? Like shit like that. Like, this is a funny story. Preston and I, we'd gone to New York to meet with Rough Rider. We didn't have any money. And back in the day, you could just get a room on a credit card. They weren't running shit. So we had gotten this room, and I was like, man, I never slept with a dude. He was like, me neither. Right? So we just go sleep head to foot, but, we gonna get up in the morning. And I was like, and the morning comes, and he's like, man, I'm gonna have to do something. And I'm like, what? It's just really crazy. So anyway, we ended up getting the room free that night. because something went wrong with the room. I was like, man, we can't do this shit anymore. It's just crazy, you know. And then Rough Rider comes to Cleveland one day to meet with us, and we didn't have any money, but back in the day, like when the Escalade first came out, you could get it for a 24-hour drive.
Yeah.
So I was like, look, you're gonna put on a black suit, and I knew some people that ran a hotel, so I was like, they're gonna let me get a conference room. We're gonna get this caddy. You're gonna act like a chauffeur. And you're going to go get them. You're going to bring them to the hotel. We're going to have a meeting. And then you take them back and nobody ever knows. Man, do you know we pull that shit off flawlessly? And that's one of the reasons they agreed to deal with us, because we looked like we belonged. Yeah. Right? To your earlier point. Yeah. We were not fucking around. We knew exactly what we wanted them to do. Yeah. Right? So a lot of this is trial and error. A lot of this is really having a lot of stupidity, but thinking that it's intelligence, right? But you can think your way into $100 million, or you could think your way into a prison cell, right? It really depends on where you want to be. So, not to get long-winded, man, I really feel like, to answer your question about ownership and agency and incentivization, you know, you need a team. One thing that I've learned, man, I was meeting with one of my mentors down in Tullahoma. He and his wife are very successful in the aerospace industry. And I was like, man, I want to make $50 million. He goes, man, you don't know how to do that. He goes, you're not even at like 5 yet. And I was like, how do you know? Right. He's like, look, 0 to 5 million is one skill set. 5 to 25 is another skill set. 25 to 75 is a different skill set. 75 to 100 is and he went on like it was a bracket. Like he knew it, right? So I was like, damn. He goes, now the best you can do is not to fuck yourself up. You need to hire somebody when you get to these points that's done it before. And I listened to him. Yeah. Right? So, you know, couple that with me wanting to be an owner. Whenever I'm getting into a business deal, I'm going to do a JV. I'm going to do it by myself as option A. Yep. You're going to work for me, right? But if that doesn't work, and I feel like you'll be more invested if you're an owner, then we'll do a JV.
And I think you can do it.
Yeah, I think you can do it. Yeah. You know, we'll test it. We'll test the market. Yeah. You know, and what I found is, man, you'll end up having 7 or 8 businesses that you're a piece of. Right. With really strong people. Right. And, you know, people always want to hear the greasy side of it, as in, you know, you'll start making money without even like trying. So this goes back to the piece of hustling while you wait, right? Like, but it may take 4 or 5 years for a business to turn a profit. So you got to have patient capital, right? Yeah. You got to have patient capital. You got to have a plan. You have to have the right people on the team, and you have to execute. And if people fuck up, you got to let them go. And you have to understand that it's not personal. You know, the first guy I had to let go, man, I sat on my fireplace and cried, bro. This is at the mortgage company, but I found that this dude was doing cocaine. I was like, man, no. You can't do that handling this amount of money. And he's like, well, I want half the business. I was like, man, I'm about to let you go. And he's like, well, who are you going to replace me with? And I was like, shit, I don't know, but I'll find somebody. Right? Your check is nice, so it's not hard to hire somebody at that level. Right. And I went home, and it was worse than breaking up with my first girlfriend. Yeah. You know, because I had plans and dreams for this dude, man. We were like married, right? We were going to take over the world. And it just didn't happen. So that was a lesson, man. You know, there's so many lessons in business, but you have to be active and you have to be in contact with people constantly. You cannot run a business from your kitchen table. Nope. You got to get your ass out the house. You know, when I got my licenses, I'll never forget, man, this dude, Matt Mooney, he was one of my first mentors when I started doing financial planning. You know, I passed my test and I showed up at the office, man, fresh suit. And I sat my bag down and he was like, what the fuck are you doing here? And I was like, coming to work. He's like, there's nobody in here gonna buy shit from you. You gotta hit the street. Yeah. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. You know, I didn't plan for that, right? But I soon got busy, right? Another thing that I think is so helpful to our generation, but I think the younger generation won't get it, is, man, every Saturday we would do life insurance cold calls from 8 to noon. Right? Yeah, man, I've never been hung up on so many ways, right? Yeah. Like, so everything else is not that bad, right? Yeah. Like, and I came to understand that if somebody says no, that doesn't mean never, it just means not right now. Yep. Had another mentor tell me, man, look, what do you think the odds are of me buying exactly the shit that you're selling when you meet me? Right. And I was like, probably low. He says, what you want to do is build a relationship so that when I think about wanting that thing, I think about you. He says, the first time you do business with somebody, they're a customer. The second time you do business, they're a client. The third time you do business, you're in a relationship. I was like, okay, that was some OG shit.
Yeah.
You know, so you have all of these over the last 20 or so years where you kind of put them together and you find a formula that works, man. You do.
It's heavy.
It's a
heavy.
lot. It's
heavy.
lot. Yeah.
It's heavy.
And we're trying to squeeze all this into an hour, but you know, it's a lot, man.
We're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Des, how we looking?
45.
Oh man, we got 15 more.
Shit.
See, I told you. Okay,
Yeah.
so now let's talk about this business, this idea that you had. You got your first check in 2014.
Yeah. So we ended up making a prison grade tablet and tried to get it in everywhere. We couldn't get it in, man. I got a call on a Friday from a lady in California, said, I want to buy 11,000. When can you get them to me? And I'm like, man, so like people you see on the TV, man, I just hung up the phone because I thought it was a prank call. Mm-hmm. And she called right back. She's like, no, this is legit. I said, well, send me an email. Sends me an email. She's like, I want 11,000 tablets and some content. Do you have a content distribution system? And I was like, yeah. Because every entrepreneur is going to say yes.
Yeah.
Now I got to go figure out how to get it,
Yep.
right? And then I lean on my previous Walmart days because there was some manufacturing there, and you know, you just replay it, right? So anyway, lady calls me back on the next Monday and says, I like what you're talking about. I need like $1 million in content. And I was, you know, entrepreneur says, are you sure? You know, because you got a lot of people. She calls me back on Tuesday. She says, how about 2 million? I was like, man, I still don't think that's enough. And I'm like, I know this lady's not going to call me tomorrow and say 3 million. Like clockwork, she calls me the next day. How about 3? We'll start with 3 million. And then I was like, all right, great. So now I got book money. I got tablet money. I don't have any software. So the company that I was working with at the time to build my website was Dev Digital. Mm-hmm. A guy named Peter Markham. Now, mind you, we had a contract, but we ain't gotten any checks yet. And I went over and I showed it. I said, look, man, I got this deal, and it's for software, and, you know, we're going to work together. And he's like, okay. And I was like, well, I don't have the money to pay you right now.
Yeah.
He goes, don't worry about it. He goes, but whatever you make, just pay me later. And I was like, man, that was like a software loan, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I didn't have to go to the bank. I didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And
Entrepreneur talking to an entrepreneur.
yeah, he knew what it was.
Yeah.
Crazy thing is, if you ever talk to him, he had a very similar situation where he went bankrupt through the crisis. So he knew exactly what I was going through. Like I had a 13-year-old car, he had a 14-year-old car, right?
Yeah.
Just trying to build back up, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, we ended up working together and hit it off, and he delivered for me. You know, so when I'm on the phone with this first customer, they're like, come on, give us a demo in a week. And I was like, okay. So then I told Peter, he's like, shit. He goes, man, all right, we both entrepreneurs, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
So, man, he puts together a demo. I go out there and I give it. It goes phenomenally. We end up delivering that product. I mean, it worked really, really well. And then other states started calling.
Yeah.
Right? And then I was like, oh, man, we're really on to something.
And
here.
no, by the way, like let's just make sure we're keeping track. You go from nothing. Like you don't even have software yet.
Yeah.
You have
I have an idea.
You have an idea. Now you're a multi-million-dollar business.
People always skip over that part, right? The work part in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you're a multi-million-dollar business.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're tracking here.
Yeah. So
Because that was $3 million in content. That wasn't the devices, right?
No, that was just
$3 million
content.
in content.
That was just content.
Okay.
So I ended up hanging out at the Entrepreneur Center, and I came across Michael Bertram one day.
Yep.
And he's like, tell me what you're doing. And I go through my deck, and he's like, man, that pitch deck is shit. And I'm like, who is this guy? I think he is, right? Like, I've never heard of him, right? This is some fool named Michael at DC.
Right.
So I go home, and I'm like, I'll show him. And I put it together, and I go back the next day. He's like, oh, man, that's much better, but still not as good as it should be. And I was like, who the fuck is Michael Bertram? Like, who is it? Like, because I had already been successful. I'm like, who's he to be telling?
Right.
You know, so, but he was so down to earth, man. Like, he had no pretense about him. So, I mean, you know, he wasn't pretentious at all. So anyway, you know, I start talking to him. And then I realized that he was an entrepreneur that had some exits.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, oh, shit. Like, I didn't know I was talking to a guy that is doing what I'm trying to do.
Right.
You know, and then I met another guy on the content side, Phil Pfeffer, who's a monster in publishing. Ran Ingram for years.
Yeah.
and I didn't know who he was. He was just a guy named Phil who was helping me, right?
Right.
You know, and Peter was just the guy that was helping me. Didn't know that he was like the largest reseller of fiber equipment on eBay for like 5 years when that shit first came out. Like owned like Computerland software store. Like I had no idea that they owned Bargain Hunt and all these other.
I knew about the Bargain Hunt.
You know what I'm saying? I'm just thinking these are regular guys because they're driving old ass cars and wearing old ass shoes like I am, right? But I didn't know what was under the hood, right? So I'm getting coached and tutored by these men over a number of years, and I didn't even know, right? So they're giving me business school lessons in real time using real money, which is the best way to learn, right? So, so growing from an idea, I needed money to fund this, and I went around Nashville, and none of the banks would touch me. And I had a very dear friend of mine, man, at the time. His name is Matt Kennickson. He just passed a couple of weeks ago. He goes, man, I got something I want to introduce you to. And I'm like, something or some people? He goes, some people. So he takes me to this bank that I will not name. I go in this room. There's like a table. It's just like this one, a table. 3 chairs on one side, 2 on the other. And they're like, tell us what you want to do. I said, I got this contract, blah, blah, blah. Guy goes, give me your license. I was like, okay, here you go. Comes back 15 minutes later. He's like, look, we're going to fund you, and you'll get everything in the mail. And I was like, okay. Right? So I get up and I walk out, and I'm like, man, this shit's really happening. We do a spreadsheet of when the payments are going to hit. I mean, there's a lot to it, right? But we basically figured out how to fund the initial in order to stand the net 45, the net 90, in order to get the money back into the company where we could flourish. And, I had some really good partners that just waited patiently for us to get us through what I call the chasm that you can only fill with either money or relationships. And then once that went through, everybody got paid. We began to grow. And, I'm just going to go back to the mission for a second. The mission of these businesses is to educate inmates while they're incarcerated, to teach them or they can get a GED, they can post-secondary education, vocational skills. I mean, things that they can use to get a job. They get out on Sunday, they can have a job on Monday. Like, that's the goal of what we're focusing on. And I can honestly say, man, like, I probably got 50 to 60,000 inmates using these systems on any given day today, which is crazy. I'd love for it to be 1 million, right? Like, that's the goal that we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
There's a lot of business in here, individual, very intricate lessons that have been learned that you can only pass down through a conversation. That when I coach, as I coach my sons, I teach them as those very influential men taught me. I've got one of them. This dude gives me 1 hour every January. Like, he's balling like on a world level. But when I go to see him, I have very specific questions about what the next chapter looks like. And he gives me an hour, and I'm telling you, like clockwork, that motherfucker will get up and walk out if I'm not done. So I got to be on it. And I do my mentees the same way, because you have to respect time.
Yep.
So coming full circle, the businesses started out as ideas that came together. I brought on partners. I became partners. Those partners then introduced me to other partners. And what you'll find is something very, very important is that I always had deal flow or cash flow, but never both at the same time, right? So when you can link up deal flow and cash flow, you have so many more opportunities to get into things that are not related, which is very similar to how I began. So it's not a challenge for me to do it now. I mean, everything from money processing to prison telecom to education to content. I mean, anything you can think of, real estate. I mean, we've got some nice things going on here in Nashville with some other partners that have nothing to do with the nexus of what I'm doing. So, man, business is business, but you got to not be an asshole. Like, that's the other thing, right? Like, you got to bring something to the table and treat people with respect. And I feel like at the end of the day, man, at some point you're playing with the casino's money. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you're debt free and you can think outside of the box and think freely and not be beholden to go to a bank to get money, that's another thing, right? Like, that's a lesson I learned where I'm like, I don't want to go to a bank to get money. I want to fund my own shit.
Do you like, I never think about banks for.
Yeah, it's a luxury to have.
Yeah. I don't think about banks, and part of that is because at this point play in real estate in a meaningful way. You know, I play more in venture, technology, consulting, media. Those have always been sort of the businesses that I've played in. And banks aren't that useful in those businesses, right? It's more venture, private equity, angel investors. You know, tell me a little bit about what it's like to develop those banking relationships.
In full transparency, that's the only great experience I've ever had. Right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So I did a thing last week.
I've just kind of written them off, like
So I did this thing last week at the lab.
Yeah.
With a banker who was really nice. There's 20 people in the room, and they're like, "Man, I need to figure out how I can do this and that." And I was like, "Look, man, you know, we're 5 minutes in. I hate to be a pessimist, but he's not gonna do shit for you, right? Like nobody's giving you money because you got a good idea. I'm like, you're gonna have to work 2 to 3 jobs to fund your own shit. Like when you're starting,
That's right.
Hands down. Don't think that you can work 8 hours a day and you're gonna be fine. So a venture dude like me, like this guy has to make sure that 98% of his loans repay.
Yeah.
I said I might be 95, right? Like I'm not just giving money to see if shit works.
Yeah.
And I really don't care what you're selling if I believe in you, right? So I don't have a lot of positive banking relationships. I do know one thing though. Like after you're successful, they begin to offer you money and deals.
Yeah, right.
Because you don't need it, right?
Yeah, they're coming to you because you're kind of a sure thing.
Yeah,
and they can make money now.
Well, and I realized in reading that an asset for a bank is a loan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where it's not good for us. An asset for us is cash.
That's right.
Flip it, right? So as much money as I can take out and as many fees as they can collect, I'm going to be an asset for them, and that's something that I choose not to do.
Right.
Man, I got a credit card for $3,000 that I had since I went bankrupt, and I look at that shit every day to remind me that I don't need to be living on credit. Do you know what I'm saying? I do have credit facilities that I could access, but I choose not to. Man, I was on the phone one day with this guy at the bank, and he was like, I asked him for something to do a wire over the phone because I couldn't make it, and he goes, let me look and see how much relationship you have with us. And I was like, oh, shit. So if the number's too low, you won't do it?
Right. He's quantifying the relationship.
Right? Let me look and see how much relationship you have with us.
Wow.
And I thought, well, shit, I'm not the relationship.
Right.
The money's the relationship, right? So, you know, I'm not even sure that I could have understood that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm not even sure that would have totally went over my head. So, man, I'm still learning. I feel like I'm super dangerous right now as it relates to taking advantage of opportunities and being in the right spaces. You know, we've got...
And you're young, by the way. I mean, I know you put 25 hard years in, and you're probably tired. But if you took like 6 months off, you'd be like,
I'd be fine again.
You'd be fine again. You'd be fine again. Yeah. You're still really, really young.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking at shit in Australia, the Bahamas. Man, we have stuff all over the place that we're working on right now. So it's really not a it's really putting the right team together. We 2 or 3 people can't play against a team of 11, right?
Yeah, right.
So now I'm in this mode
right.
of having to staff up so that I can delegate more. I feel like if I could master that, it would be the next 5 to 10 years would be amazing. Like right now, I'm trying to make sure
that next skill set.
that I'm taking care of people that I know, right? Like I'm trying to put folks on, right? Like I've got 3 right now just this week where I'm like, this is how we do it, and they're like, man, what's the hook? And I'm like, fool, there is no hook.
Right.
The hook is you got to get your shit together and do it quickly before I change my mind, right? Because somebody put me on, and it just looks funny because it doesn't really happen in our community that often where somebody says, man, there are all the resources you need, hurry up and use them, right? There's always a hook. So you know, we're moving along, man. I'm so excited about, you know, us being in contact and pushing deals and information back and forth, and
absolutely.
You know, bringing other people to the table as the deals get larger and larger. You know, and they're just at some point, I don't know if you think like this, but I do, man. Like I've got my wife and my children and my health, and money is numbers. Yeah. It's like they're like tools, right? It's like screwdrivers and hammers, right?
Exactly how I'm thinking about it right now.
You know what I'm saying? It's a tool.
Completely how I'm thinking about it. Yep.
So, you know, back in the day when you were doing some things and you would just sit there and count money in a shoebox.
Right.
You know, and you would be like, well, how would I re-up on XYZ? How long is it going to... Like, it's the same strategy, man. This is a crazy story. And then we'll close.
Yeah.
man, I was forced in college. There's a guy that I went to school with. His name was Branson. I don't remember his last name. Branson ended up getting caught with like 80 pounds of weed and 50 grand in the car over summer break. He had 10 years probation, which we thought was amazing because we just knew he was going in.
That's crazy.
You know what I'm saying?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I was not expecting that.
So, through that, in college, a lot of weed flows, and there's commerce and a market for that. And, unfortunately, this is so bad and horrible, but it's so real. You end up getting into that lifestyle because that's what everybody does, right? So you end up selling weed and you're doing weight and you're doing dollar amounts and figures and this and that.
You don't even understand what you're doing.
You don't know.
Yeah.
Right? But then what that translates into is you can read a ticker tape on Wall Street by 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What that translates into is, when you go to get your first job, if there's a math test, you end up being the first one to finish it, and it's 100% right.
Right.
What that leads to is when there's a logic test in another class, you can already think it out because your life depended on it the night before.
Yeah.
Now it's just a test.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So, there are a lot of these parallels between, I always felt like the Lord wanted me to see this stuff, but maybe not be in it, like being shot at or knowing people that got shot and graduating from high school, going away for the summer, coming back, and 5 of your friends are dead now, right? Like man, that shit is real. Just business is just, it's like school, right?
Yeah.
Like you're learning, you're getting better. The stakes are getting bigger. Your connections are getting better. The opportunities are getting better. You have to be grounded enough to realize that, and this is the way that I live my life, man, like all of this comes from God. It can go away tomorrow. I remember standing in my driveway in Brentwood, looking over, and I had a silver Ferrari 360 in one bay, and I had 2 Range Rovers in the other bay. And as clear as day, like a bird chirp, and I heard, this isn't going to last forever. Like, it was so clear, I turned around and looked behind me. And I was like, nah. Right? Like, and it was like, this isn't going to last. And I started thinking, I'm on a clock. And then that's when I went through the case and the market crashing.
Yeah.
And coming out of that,
wow.
I met with another mentor, Dale Freeman, and he was like, man, you did it once, you'll do it again. You know how much work it takes. And that's another thing that entrepreneurs know, that when you're seasoned, you know how much work it's going to take to hit a goal.
Yeah.
It's not just a dream, right? So you have to be very careful where you spend your time because you have to make it where you'll never get that time back.
Yep.
Right? So you don't want to waste it on people or ideas.
Yep.
So just be very specific and very intentional about who you're doing business with and what you're working on. I guess that's how I would end it.
Man, this has been incredible.
Yeah.
See, this is why I wanted to do it, man.
Man, I'm
because
glad
we talk a lot, but
yeah.
Man, I picked up a ton of jewels, man.
I hope so. I
Yeah.
hope so.
This is gonna be
Hope
good.
you can
Man.
work 'em.
All right, man. We're gonna do it again soon.
Let's do it
soon, because
Appreciate
your life is changing so much, man, that you'll come back to another hour and it'll blow
I'll have
everybody
another
away, man.
chapter. Yeah.
All right, man. Until next time. Peace.
Peace.